Transmedia Storytelling, NFTs, and Web3. These are at the foundation of the next age of the internet called Web3. Now, if you are wondering if there's a Web3, is there a Web 1 and Web 2? And you would be correct. And this book, Web3 by Alex Tapscott, is at the foundation of explaining that, what Web3 promises, and what happened with Web 1 and 2. And I will go into that in another video to explain that concept. But I want to more generally talk about things that you are currently experiencing that will be that next step into Web3. What we talk about on this channel is the idea that you exist in this world and you are fully empowered to make a better one based off the decisions that you make. And to make better decisions, we need to understand the world that we live in and to understand and accept that we are the ones who have the power and the ability to change it the way that we want to. Does that mean that every choice that you make matters? Yes, it does. Transmedia storytelling is this concept that sounds abstract, that sounds complicated, and probably has to do with the idea of multimedia, whether that be audio or video or written word. It has to do with something like that. And to an extent, that does occur within this idea, but what's more important is within transmedia storytelling is the idea of the audience being included with the narrative of the content of the characters and the movies and the progression of the storyline. And if you are still wondering what that means, you've experienced this by being a fan of Marvel and Harry Potter and Star Wars, Star Trek, these huge universes that have unfolded over many years and have captured audiences for much longer than most people would have ever been able to comprehend. And the reason for that is this idea of pulling the audience into the storyline. Now, if you are a fan of Harry Potter, you know that the stories started off as books that were sold as 7 different books, and then they were turned into 8 movies that represented those 7 books, and then went on to create a spin-off series called Fantastic Beasts. And there is a website called Pottermore where people can be sorted into one of the houses within Harry Potter's wizarding world, and there are different ways to interact with the world, including Universal Studios and Leavesden, which is where they filmed the Harry Potter movies. So you get to become part of the movies, but you might be saying, well, I don't actually get to be in the Harry Potter movie. So how does transmedia transform me into the movie? And the idea is that when you get to go to Universal Studios and put on the cloak and get the wand and spin it around and something magical happens, you are stepping into Harry's world and Hermione's world and are getting to be part of this idea that transcends the page, that transcends the story. So getting to be a part of the world is what makes it so enticing. That's why we're so excited to be sorted into a house. Now we get to identify with our favorite characters or maybe our least favorite characters in the movie, and we get to integrate into our own life. A lot of times people ask, well, what house are you in, if they're part of that fandom and things like that. So though we may not be actually changing the course of Harry's life within the movies, we get to continue the story and say, hey, I would have been in Gryffindor, or I would have passed the Owls exam with these grades, or whatever it is. And Universal Studios is a place where people can go to and create that narrative for themselves and try the food that Harry had within his school and go to the Weasley's Wizard shop and explore it. And you get to watch other people interact with it. There's many channels dedicated to the wizarding world, and there are so many different subscriptions that you can have that people are opening memorabilia from the movies that have been recreated by different designers. So the world of Harry Potter did not end when the last book was released or when the last movie came out. It very much has continued and has created a life of its own. We don't exactly know what happened to Harry after the cursed child came out, and we hope that he's living a great life wherever he is, but we get to embody that world and step into it. And the same goes for the Marvel Universe. They started off with comics that were transformed into movies, and people can go to Comic-Con where they can explore the different vendors that come to those places, and even the actors who played those characters on screen, and get to ask them questions about their experience, and they get to dress up as those characters. You get to become Wonder Woman for the day. You get to become Superman. And that is quite exciting, and I know that's DC, so I apologize. But Marvel, you get to become Iron Man, or you get to become Black Widow. So it's an exciting way to contribute to the storyline. Now, another very distinct thing about transmedia storytelling is the idea of storytelling. And that is a very human experience and needs a human narrative to be able to connect to for the audience. And that is truly the most important part about the storytelling, that I wonder if NFTs will be able to create from the very beginning. And I will go a little bit more into what NFTs are based off of and the goal of them in a little bit. But the idea of storytelling, of bringing to life this narrative, is based off this idea of a human connection. Now, we adore Harry not because he can fly, but because he has a very human experience of losing his parents and having to find true family within his friends, and to continue to lose people throughout his life. And he is able to overcome it and to step through those moments, and we get to see him grow up, and we get to relate to his story of finding friendships that mean so much to you. And same goes for the superheroes of the Marvel and DC universes, where we can't really connect to Wonder Woman being made out of clay by Zeus, or her being able to be more powerful than Superman, but we can connect to her having this passion to help others and to overcome this fear of letting go of the life that she knew in order to embark on this new journey to step into her purpose. So that is really at the heart of why we can connect to those stories for so long and want to embody those characters. Because we can connect to them, it's why we want to be friends with them, and why we want to create that narrative in our own lives, because that story has been developed, so there's something for us to go off of. Now, the idea of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, is to have the audience co-create the story. So there's a lot of questions that come up there from the jump, like intellectual property rights, who gets access to owning the narrative and the story, and the answer is supposedly that everyone that contributes owns part of it, and that is also difficult to kind of, at least right now, be able to conceptualize. Well, who is it? Like, what part do they own? Do they own this character? Do they own this particular development of that character? And how can you create a character without a storyline that is supposed to be created by people who aren't necessarily these creatives? So what NFTs are really trying to do is to create a space where the people who are creating their content get to actually own it. Because for a majority of history, the people who were the ones who developed the books and the movies and the screenplays were not the ones who owned the rights to it. It was the publishing house, it was the movie studios, it was other people who own the rights to an intellectual property that they didn't create. So the creators were the ones who were always at the back end, the losing end, where they were given a small amount for their entire idea versus having full ownership of their creation. And that is what we've seen happen with Taylor Swift and her not being able to own the masters of her albums, what we've seen with many writers who have had their books taken from them through different platforms, or who just don't get as many royalties and have created something that they only get a tiny percentage of. And the goal of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, means that what they create is their own right, and people can own a copy of it, but they will always get the full ownership of it and will get a royalty or a payment for every copy that other people get, but the owner is the creator, which has never before been seen. And places like Amazon with self-publishing books are a step into that direction. But being able to be the owner of the art cover of the pages and being able to print it, but you have full ownership over the entire profit, has never before been seen. And NFTs are really the future of allowing intellectual property to live with the intellectual. And if you have ever had your own IP stolen, as I have talked about before, or have had your ideas taken from you, you understand the idea of this urgency to want to own your creation. And what we'll go into with the video about Web3 is how currently creators are still not fully owning their content, which I'm using a Web 2 medium to talk about Web 3. So it's a very involved world that we're talking about right now, and that is being created, and that there's a lot of questions to be answered and a lot of failures to come. So what NFTs promise is that the owners of the content will have the ability to create it into whatever they want, and that the content creators will be the people who are watching it. So what would Harry Potter have looked like if the audience was involved with the storyline of Harry Potter? And if you watched Game of Thrones, you probably do wish that you were part of the writing of the last season. And there was, I think, 1.8 million people who signed up to have the last season redone because of how discouraged all the fans were with the way the storyline ended. So would NFTs solve that problem? And how would we be able to involve the common person into the development of a movie from the beginning? And is Harry Potter and Game of Thrones all enticing because there is a storyline that you can connect to instead of creating? So that's the biggest question for me, is how can we be involved with the characters before they're created, and would that lose the Hollywood magic? Now, I went to Universal Studios Hollywood, where they did show us some Hollywood magic and how people in movies are set on fire and they jump off of buildings and things like that. Now, when I go and watch a movie, it's not completely gone, the magic, but it does make you wonder how we are manipulating things in the background to create this image. And would people want to be involved with the creation of a movie, or do they just really want to see the end product and just support the people who can have these creative thoughts and want to go through the many iterations that it takes to create a character that's likable, or to create a character that is not likable but part of the storyline in a valuable way? So that's the question really for NFTs, and this goal and this idea of involving the audience from the very beginning. What is it that the audience is latching onto? Because when we watch Wonder Woman or Black Widow or Superman, we know what we are buying into. So how can people be aware of what they're buying into if the storyline doesn't exist yet? What story is being sold to the audience to get them to be involved? And if you know of platforms like Kickstarter, that's kind of the idea, but usually the idea is fairly developed and the audience is asked to contribute so that different versions of it can be created and released. So can we actually create a world where movies are built from the ground up with the audience that is supposed to also be the end user? Can the end user be the contributor at the beginning? And if so, will we lose this idea of wanting to watch these movies in the end, if that is one of the ways that people approach this? And maybe the answer is absolutely, and maybe the answer is not at all. Because if we had to control how Harry Potter unfolded, how would we know which one is the right storyline? And would we have to create 70 different movies in order to have many audience members be heard within the creation of the story. So all of these things are what NFTs and what these new media companies are gonna have to be able to answer. How do you at the end pick which storyline to bring to life if 30 different people are saying it should go one way versus the other, and one person doesn't get the control at the end? Who gets the final say? And who is to say that people will want to watch it that were part of contributing to it? So there's quite a few questions, but the idea of transmedia storytelling, at the heart of it, is this human story and this human connection. And NFTs are going to have to potentially work a lot harder to create that storyline. So tune in next time where we'll talk about Web3, what it means within context of Web 1 and 2, how NFTs contribute, what it even means to be an NFT. I know I didn't go into too many details, but stay tuned and come back. This world is yours. I'll see you soon. Thank you.